Alright guys, this is part 2 on the Artemisia plant. We're going to prune it today. We're going to show you how to do that, and we're going to speak a little bit more about what light requirements it has, what strata it is, a little bit more about the details of this plant. I'm going to show you how to do cuttings. To begin with, Artemisia has very irregular growth. It's not like lavenders or rosemary that you can really shape into a bush. You'll figure out that the Artemisia can be shaped, but down below there's a lot of different irregular growth that make it that it requires a different pruning than other herbs. So we'll have a look at that, and then I'll show you how many cuttings I can get from pruning this one little plant. So let's talk about stratification. In syntropic agroforestry, we divide plants in 4 categories: emergence, high, medium and low. Depends on their light requirement. Emergent need full light, whereas low strata species need the most shade. So with Artemisia, after having pruned it many times and having planted thousands of them here on the land, I realized that they are high strata, especially the Artemisia arborescens. The Artemisia absinthium can handle a little bit more shade, but it's not that much more. And yeah, that's really important, because if you shade it too much, what's going to happen as well is when you're going to prune, you're not going to see any new buds down on the old wood, which means that this plant might die if you prune it too much. And that's the thing with Artemisia as well compared to other herbs. It can only survive 3 to 5 years optimally. Sometimes it can go on for 10 years, but it's not like lavenders and rosemaries that can live 15 years, sometimes even 20 years. It's really important to understand that you cannot shade it too much. There's this idea with the permaculture layers that low plants need low light and that you can put them in your food forest below everything, but actually these plants really do not come from a place where they handle shade well. They come from places where there's a clearing, where there's a lot of light available, and as I say, they're high to sometimes even emergent species. So the Artemisias here in the syntropic system that is very dense, I see them phasing out very fast compared to, let's say, sage, for example, that is fine with a little bit more shade. And yes, so that's really important. Like in your system, if it's going to become very dense very fast and you got access to lots of irrigation, this plant might not be the one, because it might only really thrive for the first year or 2, and then it's going to be gone. Yes, in terms of strata, as I say, high to almost emergent. And it's really important to understand that the more shade there is, the more higher up the leaves are going to start. And that's really important when you're going to prune this plant, because if you prune it too low into the old wood, this plant will just die. Happened to me several times. You really need to prune into the kind of semi-hardwood. If you end up pruning into the hardwood, most of the times this plant is actually gonna die. So let's begin pruning. So really what we want to do here is to prune to the level where the new leaves are coming, the very lowest new leaves. Okay, so you see here, just do a cut there. You see that there's a new leaves coming up here, like it's in the softwood still. I don't want to cut too low into it. I want to cut there where the softwood meets the semi-hardwood. Alright, so you see this is fine to cut down here because this is still semi-hardwood. Let's use that and make cuttings. Up. Right, so you see, really important to let some new leaves coming from below, and if you let them prune for too long, these shoots are not going to appear, and most of the time these plants are actually going to die. And now I have about 10 cuttings from this. So look at that. What I need to do here is I just snap it like that, and I'll leave a few leaves like this. So yeah, perfect cutting. You can put them in a tray in the greenhouse or even outside the greenhouse, or you can stick them directly in the ground if you have enough moisture. They root very easily. So yeah, you just stick it in like that, up, keep it moist enough, and that's gonna make you a new plant. So you can see from this one little plant, I got about 10 cuttings. I'm not gonna need those because I got plenty in the greenhouse already. So I'm just gonna use it as mulch. Up, it's good mulch. It's good mulch. But yeah, I've had much bigger plants that I managed to get about 80 to 100 cuttings from, just in about 1 year's time. You just gotta let them grow enough, and then you get plenty of cuttings. A lot of the time, you get about 80 to 100% propagation rate. In the greenhouse, it's almost 100. And you can do it at all times of the year. It works really well. It's one of the easiest ones that I've ever had by cutting that I plant directly in the ground. So as I was saying in the part 1, the pruning regime of this plant is once every 3 months, really. And sometimes it can even go once every 2 months or so. It really is a plant that grows really fast. And as I say, if you do not prune it in time, it can end up really drying out at the base. And then it means that you have to prune it up higher up. But when you prune it as often as I do here, every couple months, what ends up happening is that there's always new buds coming out from the base because it's not being shaded too much by the plant becoming too tall. So that's a way to maintain it the best way possible, and you can get the most amount of biomass from it. Whereas if you have to prune it higher up, it's more work to manage. First off, it's more work to prune because you cannot prune at the base. You cannot go down and prune the 10 main branches. You have to go and prune the smaller branches above. All right, so this is what I'm talking about. You can see all this yellowing here. That can happen because of overwatering sometimes, but here it's really because it's starting to dry out because this one is being too shaded by this myoporium here. It's really wanting to take the space. You see dry branches here, and yes, all this yellowing here, the leaves are just dying because of the amount of shade it's getting. So you can see here there's clearly no strong new buds coming from the trunk there. So you see, this is a perfect example of the conditions that your Artemisias should not be getting into. They just weaken and die. You can see the comparison to this lavender, which you can see has a very regular shape, and it's much easier to actually shape it with a hedge trimmer. Whereas for the Artemisia, I find the best is to use secateurs because you want to cut it down really at the base, because that makes the healthiest plants. All of these things are really to take into consideration. So I'm just going to do a recap. So the Artemisia is a high strata. Artemisia arborescens and Absinthium are a high strata species, meaning that they need almost full light. Secondly, they have irregular branches. So it's really important when you're pruning to not prune them in a way that you would do with herbs. It's important to prune them down at the base and to do that often. As I say, every 2 months, 3 months maximum. If you wait longer than that, most of the time it's not going to be new buds showing up from below, as I was explaining. And the third consideration is how long it lives. It lives less time than most of the herbs. It lives 3 to 5 years usually, which makes it a really good placenta too. So if you maintain it well with a lot of light, you might be able to get 10 years from this plant. I hope you learned something useful here. And on this channel, I'm gonna cover all of the Mediterranean agroforestry plants that I've planted, pruned and managed, and you learn here in what context to plant them, and also you learn how to prune them. So I'll see you in the next.